All right, Nuggets fans, welcome into Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at BetOnline. I am your host, Ryan Blackburn at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network, and I am here. I am excited, ready to talk about last night's Denver Nuggets win as the Nuggets defeat the New Orleans Pelicans. Final score 125-113, a game that was that close, but not really that close. It never felt like the Nuggets were ever at any danger points at any time in that game yesterday. And a lot of that was because of the starters taking things seriously, and especially Michael Porter Jr. just rolling last night. It was a lot of fun. Wearing my Yeah Mike shirt in solidarity. Did a fantastic job last night. He did. So, Mike, if you're watching the show, congratulations, my guy. That was a awesome performance, a fun performance to watch for sure. Great stuff from the man himself, and great stuff from a lot of Nuggets last night, including Zeke Nnaji. A surprising Zeke Nnaji renaissance performance there. Did a lot of great things against Zion Williamson and hit a couple threes to boot. We'll get into it all. We'll talk about a variety of things in that game last night, as well as stuff that Michael Malone said post-game about Michael Porter Jr., which was extremely notable. We'll get into it all, but first, gotta tell everybody about BetOnline. You know the drill. You know what they got. They are, like, during this super week, BetOnline is your super betting app. They are the opportunity for you and the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for online betting in 2025. A massive selection of odds and props across the super game this Sunday. And whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. Whether it's football or basketball or college basketball or NHL, UFC, whatever you want, they're your number one sports betting source. So make sure to go check out all the props, all the fun stuff that they've got going on for this weekend. They've got you covered. BetOnline, the game starts here. Once again, I'm your host, Ryan Blackburn. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. I met a couple of folks last night who were very complimentary of the clip that I had with Matt Moore over the weekend, which was hilarious. But also just that we're fans of the work. So Matt, if you're listening, thank you so much. The other guy, I did not catch your name, but I walked past him on the concourse at Ball Arena. So thank you for stopping and sharing the love. I do appreciate it. Always nice if you're at Ball Arena. Don't hesitate to come up and say hi. Always love talking to people. It makes me feel like this does actually make a difference, what I'm doing here. So thank you if you do stop by. All right, let's get into it. Let's talk about this game. Cedric's here. Great game from MPJ. Dominic Lopez is here. Good morning, Ryan Blackburn. Him is here as always, 3 points off of his career high. I remember that 39-point game. I believe it was against the Houston Rockets back when the Rockets were bad. I could be wrong about, though, because he had a 39-point game and a 37-point game, and I'm not sure which one was which. But tremendous performance last night from Michael Porter Jr. Ozair is here saying, hello from Pakistan. Hello, Ozair. Very nice to see you. Always all the way out there in Pakistan. So thank you for stopping by on this for me morning, but for you probably afternoon sometime. Yeah, let's get into this. Let's talk about the different layers. 36 points for Michael Porter Jr. last night in 39 minutes. He played a whole bunch of minutes in the second half, and obviously you understand why. Aaron Gordon was out, and Zeke Nnaji started in his place. A big task, of course, for Zeke Nnaji. He was very much more focused on the defensive end than the offensive end, but he still found ways to impact the game offensively. Got to give him credit there. We'll get into that in just a second. But it does leave some opportunities open for Michael Porter, that when Jokic only takes 13 shots, he did get to the free throw line 10 times, but he was very much more in facilitation mode and trying to set up Porter. When Jamal Murray is taking he took 17 shots, but they staggered their minutes at times. It wasn't necessarily all like them trying to fight for the basketball. I thought that Murray set up Porter really well last night. I thought that Jokic set up Porter really well. And then Porter just found other ways to be impactful in transition and off of screens and like getting offensive rebounds and just doing a lot in every single conceivable way that you would want him to be impactful. 36 points is a great number. It's the season high for him this year. He's only like, this is his first time being above 30. And I believe he had it after 3 quarters. Like the dude was on fire. And it was great to watch because he started the game 0 of 4. And I thought initially, man, he looks kind of off here. What's going on? Is something impacting him? Like what's happening here? And then he immediately turned it around. He got a run out in transition for a dunk. And just being able to see that, I think, calmed him down a little bit. And he just locked in. He made his next 6 shots after missing his first 4. And just overall was raining hellfire in this game. He had a 3 in the deep left corner over Zion Williamson, who committed a foul and 1 4-point play that Mike converted. He went 5 of 5 from the line. If you've followed his season so far, you'd know he's shooting about 73% from the free throw line. So 5 of 5, great sign, great number. Like you want to see him continue to lock in at that free throw line. It wasn't just the shooting, but that was, of course, the most impactful piece of this. The Pelicans just didn't have an answer for him. Trey Murphy was a great answer on the other end of the floor, scoring as many points as he did, but it was really interesting to watch those guys go back and forth. You've got guys at the same position, effectively, small forward, kind of that bigger forward position, and Trey Murphy was just lighting it up on the other side. And then Michael Porter just, hey, you know what? I can shoot too. I can play too. And I'm not sure if they played it to a draw, but it was very close. Really, really impressive shooting performance from Trey Murphy on the other side. 41 is crazy. 8 threes was the second most the Nuggets have had against them this year. And he did that in 3 quarters. He didn't actually attempt a 3 in the 4th quarter, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe he attempted 1 and missed it, but 8 threes, the second most. Jordan Poole was the most with 9. And there was a point at kind of the end of the 3rd quarter, given that New Orleans had just gone on a 35-25 3rd quarter run. I thought, hey, you know what? Like they could come back if Denver doesn't, if they screw around. But the lineup at the beginning of the 4th quarter with, I think it was Murray, Strother, you had Porter, Zeke Nnaji, and DeAndre Jordan. That lineup was very good. They were very steady. You had Porter being plus 22, Murray being plus 20, Zeke when he was matched up with Zion, just very good. Again, we'll get into that in just a bit. But I just got to give Porter so much credit for what he was able to do. And like to be able to get up as many shots as he did, it takes skill. It takes a lot of relentlessness, and it takes the team continuing to find him in these moments. So credit to him for doing that, and credit to the Nuggets for continuing to feature him. It was very clear early on that they wanted to get him as many shots as possible. I think they knew that that was a good game plan. And the Pelicans specifically have always been good for Porter because they don't have great off-ball defense. Like their on-ball defense with Herb Jones and sometimes DeJounte Murray, Jose Alvarado, they'll load up against Jokic and try to double him very frequently. So it often leads to those off-ball players being very successful. Christian Brown had a lot of shots that he was able to get up, didn't shoot very efficiently yesterday, but he had opportunities. And then you had Porter. So like the off-ball shooting was very clearly a focus for Denver. So credit to them and credit to Porter for taking full advantage. Jokic, as you know, 27 points, 14 rebounds, 10 assists, a very strong night for him, 1 steal, 2 blocks. I thought his defense was solid as well. He didn't exactly have to do much against Yves Missi and Zion Williamson and Jeremiah Robinson Earl and Carlo Matkovic. At one point, Jokic just decided, you know what, Carlo, if you want to shoot that perimeter jumper, then go ahead. He hit it. But overall, it was just a pretty easy night, about as easy night as possible for Jokic tonight or last night. And that's what you want. You want him to be able, like, he played 35 minutes and got a full, I think, 6.5 in that second half as a break. And that's very rare. You don't actually see that very often with him. But it was a very impressive performance from Denver just in their bench unit. The only guy who was a minus off the bench was Jalen Pickett, and I thought he was pretty bad. He'll probably bounce back, but he was pretty bad. And so Jokic doesn't have to stress too terribly much. He was a plus 13 and a 12-point win. And so it doesn't have to be plus 20. It doesn't have to be plus 25. He was just plus 13, and that was fine. That was very capable. And then Jamal Murray, 20 points, 8 assists, 5 fouls for some reason. I'm kind of surprised by that. He was tasked with chasing around Trey Murphy a lot of this time. Christian Brown also spent some time, but Denver just didn't have the personnel. Trey Murphy, 41 points. CJ McCollum, 30 points. They each shot reasonably efficiently, not crazy efficient, but it was interesting to see what happened there, because if Zion had also gone off and played well, then the Pelicans would have been in that game. They would have been more seriously in that game, because Denver didn't have the defensive personnel to really guard CJ McCollum or Trey Murphy. And they shouldn't have had the defensive personnel to guard Zion. Of course, Zeke Nnaji changed that, and that was awesome to watch. But on the other end for Murray, 8 assists was really good. He was diming up for the entire night. Not his most efficient scoring performance, but he still got to 20 points. And also had 0 turnovers, which is notable when you have the ball in your hands for as often as he does. 8 assists, 0 turnovers, plus 20. There was a reason why he was a plus 20. So it's going to be interesting to see how Denver continues to shape around the trade deadline time. But if they continue to get performances like they did from Jokic, Murray, MPJ, like you had 36 from MPJ, 27-point triple-double from Jokic, and 20 points and 8 assists from Murray, it's going to be relatively straightforward. Now, again, the Pelicans are 12-37, and that's probably not going to continue against the best teams in the NBA. But what they showed tonight was that there's a baseline. There's a baseline again. I think they rediscovered that. Especially from an offensive perspective. You're never going to see this team struggle really on the offensive end. And when you have Jokic, Murray, Porter, and they're all playing at that level, then it's just a little bit different. Like it's going to be really, really difficult for a team like the Pelicans to stop them. So again, Pelicans aren't the staunchest defense. But Denver, I think, continues to figure some stuff out. And again, it's so funny how often they oscillate between the sky is falling and we look great. And I thought that they looked great last night. There was a very comfortable 12-point win. Nothing crazy. They did not have to really stress about that one. And that's what you want to see in a matchup like that. So credit to him. And credit to Porter, credit to Murray, credit to Jokic. Those guys, I think, did a good job of leading Denver through that, even while there were injuries out there. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Zeke Nnaji and some extended thoughts on him. We'll talk about some of the other injuries that Denver has had, as well as a Julian Strawther performance that I thought was notable. We'll be right back here on Pickaxe and Roll. All right, we are back. Pickaxe and Roll. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We'll really, really appreciate it if you do. Yeah, this is going to be interesting. This is going to be an interesting week, of course, for Denver. As you guys know, I podcasted yesterday, talked about all the different things. And I talked about the other trades that happened in the NBA. There will be more trades. There was a trade last night that I kind of missed, but it was a couple second round picks being flipped. There will continue to be more like that, and I don't think that Denver's going to be super active, but we'll talk about that in the third segment. Right now, let's talk about Zeke Nnaji. Let's talk about a guy who, look, I wrote off for dead effectively. He has been really struggling for much of this season. And like, this is just what it has to be, unfortunately. He had not earned time until the Nuggets needed him. And like just the way that he had played, the way that the Nuggets had played when he was on the floor, it's hard for Michael Malone to trust him. And I don't blame Michael Malone for that in any way, shape, or form, given that Denver has given several chances over the course of Zeke's career. But one thing that they have not done, and this should be Michael Malone's own admission, not necessarily his fault, but one thing that has really irked some people is that when Julian Strawther gets minutes next to Jokic and Peyton Watson gets minutes next to Jokic and Christian Brown gets minutes next to Jokic, and you get all the young guys, and you can't really tell whether they're going to fit in Denver unless they play next to Jokic for an extended period of time. You can't like write them off based off of what they do without the best player in the world. And lo and behold, Zeke Nnaji, I think, found something at the power forward position in this particular matchup. Going up against Zion Williamson, Zeke Nnaji played 31 minutes per game, or 31 minutes as the starting power forward for Denver, staggered and played across from Zion basically the entire time. Zion played 28 minutes and was only 5 of 13 from the field. And he at one point was 2 of 9 from the field before this game was effectively out of reach. And then he went 3 of 4 on his last 4 shots. So like I'm not sure how much to blame Zeke for the ending there. I don't think he deserves any blame really once the game was in hand. But Zeke was fantastic yesterday. And of course the expectations are pretty low. He still had 5 fouls. He was still a +3 in a game the Nuggets won by 12. And like all the other starters, except for Christian, were like much higher in the plus minus. And so there's something there that's not happening. But you don't expect him to be +3. And based off of the way that things have gone, you expect him to be like closer to -10, -12, in that general range. And like the team just has not been able to function around him for much of his season, much of his career. But playing next to Jokic and playing next to Porter, very interesting to see that group going together. We haven't seen Nnaji play the 4, spacing for Jokic. And part of it is because Denver has really not trusted his jumper, and they've not trusted his ability to space there. But he definitely found something. First shot of the game, he hit the 3 in the corner. That's exactly what you need to do in that case. Like, you need to take it, and you need to take it confidently, and I'm glad he took it. Glad he made it, of course. In the previous game, he airballed from the same spot. So awesome for him just to be able to kind of get that out of the way immediately. And then he played great defense against Zion throughout the game, and it was just awesome to watch him play athletically, match up physically, and he also kind of went back on the other end, scored 12 points, 5 of 9 from the field, 2 of 4 from 3. Was it a perfect outing? No. But was it a good enough outing to really get Denver through a game against this Pelicans team? Absolutely. So it's nice to see. And this is the thing that Denver has missed for much of the season. How many times has Hunter Tyson really stepped up this year? How many times has Dario Saric really stepped up this year? Obviously, they've had injuries to Vlatko, and he might be back later this season. We don't know yet. Still being reevaluated. Deron Holmes is not going to play. Jalen Pickett, I think, has had times. He's had a couple games here or there where he's stepped up, but for the most part, it's been garbage time. So you've got most of your bench and then no two-way players that have really not stepped up. And Zeke, like given the contract that he has and given that he's a 5th-year player at this point, you would expect him to be put into this position at some point and to be able to succeed. It hadn't happened up until the previous game against the Charlotte Hornets. And perhaps playing against Charlotte and playing against New Orleans isn't exactly the greatest tell. But it does give Denver the opportunity to injury manage Aaron Gordon, which he clearly needed. Played both nights of the back-to-back on that road trip. I think that was a mistake in retrospect. but it was still important that he did so in order to get that second win, in order to get both wins, honestly. And Denver needed somebody in this moment to step up. And I'm glad that it was Zeke. Just having somebody to soak up those minutes and play with more physicality and play with more like just athleticism. He was able to, like, the drive that he had around Zeke in the second, or around Zion in the second quarter, was great. Like, you get the offensive rebound kick out, and then Zion's out of position, and Zeke just drove right around him and dunked it. It was awesome. So we hadn't seen that from Zeke up until this point in the season. It's game 50. And like, Denver obviously didn't give him a lot of opportunities, but he hadn't really earned it. And like, in the times where he was given some stretches, he wasn't producing. And here's the rub. Jamal Murray made me a hater, which is a hilarious screen name, says, but he is not a 5. He is not a 5. Zeke is not a 5. And maybe that's true. Maybe it is. But it doesn't mean that he shouldn't be able to handle minutes. And it was so bad early on in the season that like there was like just justifying sliding him to the 4 when you've got other guys like Peyton Watson and Michael Porter and Aaron Gordon and like all of these other players on the roster. Like, Hunter Tyson deserved a little bit of time to see if he could figure some stuff out. Vlatko Čančar initially deserved some time. I'm glad that they've finally come around to this, and whether this happens consistently or not, I don't know. But I do think that's like, you might be right. You might. The problem, and like Marcel Zero also says it here, AG is also not a 5. Maybe Denver just need, like, this is something that Matt Moore also said to me yesterday. Maybe Denver just needs a true backup 5 going forward, and it can't be Zeke. It can't be Aaron Gordon. And they just need somebody that can consistently take minutes pressure off of Jokic. Maybe that's Deron Holmes. Although I think a lot of people also think that Deron Holmes is more of a 4. And if Denver keeps drafting and adding players that are better at the 4 than they are the 5, then they're never, ever going to be able to fill those backup 5 minutes with somebody that can do it consistently. That's why DJ has been such a big deal. That's why them trying to get Dario Saric, like they wanted to do that. They wanted to fill that gap, but it just hasn't worked out. So maybe there's something that they could find. And maybe that kind of activates Zeke Nnaji a little bit. Maybe it allows Peyton Watson to continue playing the 3. Maybe it allows everybody to play a little bit bigger if they're able to do that. But they need a 5 that they can trust. And it hasn't been Zeke. AG probably can't handle it physically. It hasn't been Dario. DeAndre Jordan has done an admirable job this year of being able to fill in that gap, but he can't play every night. And especially going forward, I think he's going into year 16, 17, 18, just in that general range. Like, you can't keep counting on that for the entirety of this tenure. So that has to be a priority for Denver in the offseason, I think. Find a backup center that you trust and can play 82 games, not 60, not 50, not 40, 82 or somewhere close to it. So I think maybe this would allow Zeke to play a little bit more at the backup 4. And I'm open to that possibility. I still don't think that that's going to be Denver's future, but of course I'm open to it and would love to see him continue to kind of turn around his career. He's such a nice dude. He's such a genuine person. I interviewed him for his foundation a couple years ago at training camp back in 2022. And like, he's just a nice guy, a genuine person. So you want the best for him. It hasn't happened yet. And Denver has to make tough business decisions. And so we'll see what the trade deadline brings. But I do think that maybe this allows Aaron to have some breathing room a little bit, especially against some of those worst teams. Like, Zeke could fill in, and it doesn't have to be 30 minutes the entire time, but 20 would be great too. So we'll get into that in the future weeks, into the future days. Maybe we'll see what happens on Wednesday. I assume that he'll probably play on Wednesday. We'll find out. Julian Strawther was the other one that I wanted to talk about. I thought that DJ played reasonably well. Didn't grab too many offensive rebounds or defensive rebounds, which was tough. The Pelicans grabbed a fair amount of offensive rebounds on their end of the floor. That's another thing that kept him in the game, the offensive rebound kick out for three. Julian struggled again defensively, but there were some moments that he had that were very positive. He had a couple of steals. He had a couple of nice contests, there was one where he overran. It was either CJ McCollum or Jordan Hawkins, but then stayed in the picture and contested from behind. That was a really impressive play, just being able to recover like that. And just a variety of other things that he was able to do. The three-point shooting wasn't great. The free throw shooting wasn't great. But the two-point shooting, he shot 5 of 5. 5 of 5 on twos, which I thought was obviously very impressive. And then he also set up a couple of people, 2 assists in this game. And just the navigation that he had, the patience that he had in the pick and roll, the DHO coming off of screens, there were just a lot of awesome things that he was able to do. So 15 points for him and 10 shots, great number. Could have been more efficient and has been more efficient in the past. But if Denver can consistently be getting that 10 to 15 point number from Julian, they're going to be happy. Too often this year, it's been like 4 points on 8 shots. It's been like 2 points on 6 shots. It's been 8 points on 12 shots in that general range. But he has more chops. Like there's more that he can continue to do. I think that and I said this to somebody yesterday, between the three of Christian, Peyton, and Julian, I still don't know who's going to be their long-term main guy they build around between those young guys. And it might be multiple. It might be all three, just depending on what happens. I don't think it's going to be all three. I think that Denver's probably going to have to make a choice at some point between one or two of those three. And Julian could be that. Now, he still has some defensive things that he has to improve upon, but you can't teach some of the scoring chops that he has. And you're watching a guy like Trey Murphy last night. If you're a Nuggets fan, you're wondering, holy cow, that guy is just an absolute sniper from three. And it's not just on 24 footers. It's the 28-foot shots, the one where he really spaces out to the perimeter. Julian has that kind of three-point shooting when he's capable. There is that level that he can bring. And so everybody, all Nuggets fans often complain about the bench guy or even the floor spacing guard or wing that always kills them, that always hits 5 threes against them and gets the 7 open shots and hits 5 of them. Julian can do that on a consistent basis. And as he continues to fill out and get stronger, I do think that he's going to improve defensively. His floor game is already pretty good. And I just think that there is an opportunity for him. So we will see what happens and how he continues to evolve. But I've just been very impressed overall this season about the trend line for him. It's not always going to be like this. It's not always going to be at peak level. But he is moving up like this, steady. It has been a very steady performance from him, and I've been pretty impressed to see. All right. I see we've got a couple super chats. When we come back, we will go over those super chats first, and then I will talk about Michael Malone's statements on Michael Porter Jr. and what he has brought to the table. We'll be right back on Pickaxe and Roll. All right, final segment, Pickaxe and Roll. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. We've got some super chats as I have been notified in the comments. Cedric Exquisite 199 says, no, Dr. Van, we want to trade Sarge / Zeke for Zion. Now, if they were able to do that, then that would be fantastic. But uh, I hope people realize that Zion makes a whole heck of a lot of money. There are some opportunities, I think, for the Pelicans to kind of get out of his contract. But going forward, and like Zion looks pretty bad. Like he looks not great. He's making the same amounts of money effectively as Michael Porter this year, but then he's making 39.4 million, 42.1 million, and 44.8 million in the next 3 seasons. I don't know what the Pelicans are going to do. I don't think that you can justify continuing to pay him and continuing to build around him because he's just so unreliable. Now, other teams are going to think the same thing. And maybe there's also another team that wants to trust the talent and believes that they could get out more from him than what the Pelicans have gotten out from him. And like, would that be so shocking? No, of course not. Now, I do think that Zion has, of course, still has some things to work on and figure out. He looked horrible yesterday, and not just because he was getting clamped by Zeke Nnaji, but because like he just wasn't playing any defense at all. And the capability that he has defensively is so low because he's 6'6" as a power forward and often has to slide the center in some of these lineups for the Pelicans. So they didn't do that a bunch yesterday, but that's what they're like. A lot of people think that the best version of Zion is at the center spot because he can then have as much space as possible. But he's just not capable of that right now, especially defensively. But thank you for the super chat. And then we've got Makaru. Makaru. I think that's how you say it. Gets the $2 in. Imagine CB, Piwa, Zeke, and Yabusele or Boucher on the bench. Yeah, like that's certainly a possibility. It kind of is, because in order to match, I guess Yabusele, you don't necessarily have to match. But think about what Jokic just did to Yabusele. I know that Yabusele also did the same thing to him on the other side, but how easy it was for Jokic on the offensive end against him. Boucher would be the same thing. So if you're putting those guys at the 5 and Zeke at the 4, you're still kind of hurting from a defensive standpoint. So maybe Christian Brown and Peyton Watson and Zeke Nnaji as a roamer could really make up for that. But I think that there's still some weakness there. The other thing is that you need matching salary in order to go out, in order to get a guy like Boucher. Could they get that with Dario, Vlatko? I don't think that, like, because here's the thing. Boucher makes like 12 million. So, or maybe it's 10.5, but they still have to get over that number in order to acquire somebody like Boucher. So it's a tough place for them to be logistically with the salary cap. But I mean, I like the idea, and Denver should be continuing to think about that. The other thing, of course, that they have to think about, DaRon Holmes will be coming back next year, and he's somebody that I think the team really believes in. So they're going to want to give him time as well. Do you invest a whole bunch of like resources into a player that's like DaRon Holmes when you're going to get DaRon Holmes next year? I don't know. I don't know if that's the case or not, but it's a fun thought. So thank you for the super chat. All right. Himmiz says, it would be really funny if Calvin trades MPJ after what Malone said last night. Yeah, and we'll get into that now. we will get into that now. Michael Porter had a great night last night, and I don't assume that this was Michael Malone just talking because of that night. I think that this is what is actually happening. Michael Malone last night, when asked by Vinny Benedetto of the Denver Gazette, it was a very good question, very well framed to get a good answer from Malone. Basically asked him about if he had any conversations with Michael Porter ahead of the trade deadline. And Michael Malone said, no, I'm not going to have a conversation with somebody if there's nothing happening, if there's nothing there, if there's nothing possible. He said, we are, and quote, we are not trading Michael Porter. And as you heard from me on yesterday's show, That's something that I've been hearing and something that like Denver has been trending away from the idea of trading Mike. Like it's still something that they could in theory do and that they were exploring the possibilities of it, but the possibilities that they were exploring were not great. Like it was not awesome for some of those possibilities that they were looking at. So I think that they have effectively decided um no, like we're not going to trade him. And it's going to be interesting to see whether that's the right call or not. But if Mike keeps playing the way that he's like played in this last game and continues to stay aggressive, the Nuggets can continue to find so many threes for him. 12 threes is a much better number for him than 3 threes and 4 threes, which he often finds. Denver has to continue to feature him in that best way. Am I seeing in the comments that Altitude is back on Comcast right now? Did something come out like that? Like I've been doing my show. Why does everything come out during my during my show? We'll get into. Let me have the comments answer that in a bit. But Michael Malone, yes, he effectively said we are not trading Michael Porter, and that is notable, of course, because as I've mentioned and as I wrote about in my article last night, Michael Porter is really Denver's only major trade chip to change things up. If they decide, hey, like Murray and Jokic, or Murray and Gordon, excuse me, they're ineligible to be traded this year. Jokic obviously isn't going to be traded. Porter is the next salary up because the next one up after that is Zeke Nnaji, who's making like 8.8, 8.9 million, which just isn't enough to get a major upgrade piece. Denver doesn't have the salaries in order to match for some of those larger contracts and some of those starter caliber players that I think that they would want to trade for. So that is a very notable declaration from Michael Malone, in my opinion. It limits what Denver can try to do. And it effectively says, and Jokic actually said this last night too. He was asked, I think, by Vinny as well, do you believe that you have everything that you need in that locker room to win? And he said, yes. He didn't even elaborate on it. He just said, we believe, like, yes, as in we believe we know what we have and that we are good enough. And maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong. I think he's probably wrong. But I'm willing to see it through, and I think Nuggets fans should be willing to see it through. With, as I mentioned in yesterday's show, the Nuggets were always kind of going to go on a 2 to 3 year window. And then it was a 2-year window initially, and then that extra, or the winning the championship bought them an extra year. Like, hey, this main core, we're going to see what it looks like. We're going to see what we do. We're going to see how it looks like. And I'm interested to see what ultimately happens and whether they're able to kind of capitalize on that this year. If they don't win a championship, or if they don't show that they are close, like super close in winning a championship, like they lose again in the second round, or they lose in the first round, then of course you're going to see some changes. The team is required at that point to probably see some changes. And that's a tough place for everybody to be. It puts a lot of pressure on everybody individually. Of course, you don't want to have to say things like that. It's just reality with Jokic playing at the level that he is right now. Denver just needs to explore that. And maybe they will. And maybe like when the offseason happens and you have the opportunity to trade Murray or Gordon instead of Porter, it gives Denver more optionality for the way that they want to go. And maybe that's the right call. Maybe it is the right call. And obviously trading in the middle of the season, trading at the trade deadline, it's extremely restrictive in the optionality that you have. If Denver does stumble upon something, if somebody was to say, we want Michael Porter and we're willing to pay you fair, like awesome value for him, then maybe that's what they still decide to do. I'd be shocked. Like if Calvin still was trading Michael Porter at this trade deadline, that would be crazy. That would be an insane thing to do. But hell, maybe Luka Doncic comes available and you just got to do it. You just got to make it happen. Like you can't, you can go back on your promise if Luka Doncic becomes available. I don't expect that to happen. I don't expect everybody to be as dumb as Nico Harrison and the Dallas Mavericks. But if there is a team that's like, hey, we have our guy, we like your guy, well, like I don't know what even the name would be at that point. We think that it would make a lot of sense. And if it does make sense, maybe Denver still does it. But I kind of think that they're just like, they don't think that anything's going to happen. They think that most everything's going to run its course, and they're going to see it out with this current group. And that's probably the right call. Like, as much as I've pontificated on different trades and different ideas, I want to make sure that everybody knows what the options are and knows that Denver has this, and this on the table for themselves. That's always what I try to do, to give everybody as much information as possible. And Clear Vision Overland says KD. Yeah, that's actually a great one. If Kevin Durant became available and the Nuggets could get Kevin Durant, you probably have to explore that because it's Kevin Durant. Like it's like that's a crazy level of player. And the idea of pairing him with Jokic and Murray, I think would be insane. Barring that, I think that Michael Porter's on the Nuggets. I think that they're just going to let this run through, and we're going to see what happens. I want to see if they can put together another run with this group. It's on Murray to step up and be better than he was in the playoffs last year. It's on Jokic to continue to be as have as much endurance and mental endurance as he possibly can to get through the playoffs this year. It's on Christian Brown stepping up. It's on Aaron Gordon stepping up. It's on Russell Westbrook turning around his playoff reputation and becoming the best version of himself at the right time. There's going to be a lot of questions. And Denver has a lot of questions to answer. There's a lot of ways for this thing to go wrong, which is why I think that it probably will. But you have to be willing to believe and to try. And so I think at this point, Denver's probably going to go that direction. Maybe they make a small move that doesn't involve Porter. It involves somebody else. But I think at this point, you just got to go through with that. And we'll see where they go from here. All right. That is all that I have for you guys. The trade deadline is in 2 days. I'm not sure what my schedule is going to look like. If there is something that happens during the rest of today or early tomorrow, then I will probably podcast during the day tomorrow before the game. We will talk about, I'll try to stay as up to date as possible. This is obviously a very important week. And so whenever it happens, I will get you guys as much information as I can, and we can talk about everything. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Appreciate the love and support on the podcast as always, folks. Please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button on the way out. I will talk to you guys very soon.